My son's fiancée asked about the deed to our family property 3 times in 2 visits. The first time, I thought she was practical. The second time, I thought she was thorough. The third time, something cold settled in my chest. The same feeling I used to get on the bench when a witness's story didn't quite line up. 31 years as a federal judge teaches you to recognize the gap between what people say and what they mean. At the engagement party 2 months later, while 70 guests filled our home with champagne and laughter, my son pressed a folded cocktail napkin into my palm as he passed me in the hallway. I opened it in the kitchen. 4 words in his handwriting, the same careful print he'd used since 3rd grade. Mom, she's not real. I looked up at the ceiling for exactly 3 seconds. Then, I straightened my dress, walked back into the living room, and started making decisions. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got there. Robert passed 3 years ago November, pancreatic cancer. 4 months from diagnosis to the end. We'd had 38 years together, and at the finish, I would have traded every one of my rulings, every commendation, every case I'd ever won, for 4 more months. He went quickly, which the doctor said was a mercy. I'm still not sure I agree. What he left behind was a life built carefully and quietly. Robert had started his construction company at 26, with $12,000 borrowed from his mother. By the time he sold it at 61, Holloway Construction had completed 217 projects across Tennessee and Kentucky, including 3 federal courthouses. He'd held 17 patents for structural reinforcement techniques. He'd invested conservatively, lived modestly, and never once drove a car that cost more than his employees' annual salaries. Our home was a farmhouse on 220 acres outside Nashville. We'd bought it in 1989 for $140,000. The land alone was worth considerably more than that now. I hadn't told Daniel the full picture of what Robert had left us. He knew we owned the farm, knew I was comfortable. But Robert had always believed that telling your children the exact numbers changed them before they were ready. Money is a responsibility, not a reward, he used to say. Let them earn their own first. Daniel had. He was 31, a structural engineer, sharp and steady in all the ways his father had been. He'd moved to Atlanta after graduate school, come home for holidays, called every Sunday. When he told me last fall he was bringing someone home for Thanksgiving, I'd spent 2 days making Robert's recipes, setting the good china out, telling myself to keep an open mind. Her name was Vanessa Cole. She arrived with my son wearing the simple dress and a smile that reached her eyes just the right amount. Warm without being excessive, interested without being intrusive. She complimented the farmhouse immediately. The exposed beams, the original windows, the way the back porch looked out over the lower pasture. Robert would have loved you for noticing that, I said, and I meant it. She asked thoughtful questions over dinner. What had I done on the bench? Did I miss it? How long had the family owned the property? I answered easily. The conversation moved to Daniel's work, to their life in Atlanta, to plans and possibilities. It was only after dinner, when the 3 of us were walking the back pasture in the November dark, that Vanessa paused at the fence line and asked the first question. Where does the property end out here, Margaret? I told her. The creek to the south, the old logging road to the east. About 220 acres total. That's substantial, she said. This close to Nashville, that must be worth a fortune. I smiled and said what I always say. It's home. She nodded and we walked back. I filed the question away the way I used to file inconsistencies during trial. Not evidence. Just something to remember. She came back in January with Daniel for a long weekend. On Saturday morning while Daniel slept in, Vanessa and I had coffee on the back porch. She was good company, genuinely funny. The kind of woman who listened more than she talked. I found myself relaxing in spite of myself. Then she asked about the deed. She framed it as curiosity. I've been reading about Tennessee property law, she said, for when Daniel and I eventually buy something. I was wondering, with a property this size, is the deed straightforward? Or are there trust structures involved? I kept my expression neutral. 31 years on the bench. Catherine handles all of that, I said simply. My estate attorney. Very thorough. Vanessa nodded, smiled, changed the subject. That was the second time. The third came in March. Daniel had gone to pick up groceries, and Vanessa asked if she could look at Robert's old study. She'd heard so much about him, she said. She just wanted to feel closer to who he'd been. I showed her in, stood in the doorway while she moved around the room. She paused at the filing cabinet. Are these his business records? She asked. Some of them. Why? I don't know. She touched the cabinet drawer just for a moment, her fingers resting on the handle before she pulled them back. He built so much. I just think it's remarkable. I said nothing. But that night, after they left, I went into the study and looked at every file in that cabinet. Nothing was missing. Nothing was disturbed. But when I sat in Robert's chair and closed my eyes, I could hear his voice as clearly as I ever had. Trust your gut, Maggie. You've always been better at reading people than you give yourself credit for. I called Catherine the next morning. Catherine had been Robert's estate attorney for 20 years and mine for the 3 since he died. She was 62, precise, and constitutionally incapable of reassuring anyone with anything less than documented fact. Tell me what you've observed, she said. I told her. 3 questions about the property across 4 months. The hand on the filing cabinet. The specific interest in deed structures and trusts. You think she's targeting the estate? Catherine asked. I think she's researching it, I said. There's a difference. I could be wrong. You've sat on more fraud cases than I've had hot meals. Are you wrong? I looked out the window at the lower pasture where Robert had taught Daniel to drive a tractor at age 9. No, I said. I don't think I am. I have someone I trust, Catherine said. An investigator. Former FBI, 20 years. His name is Earl Grady. He's thorough and he's quiet. Let me make a call. The engagement happened in April. Daniel called me on a Wednesday evening, his voice carrying that particular warmth I hadn't heard since before his father died. She said yes. I made all the right sounds. I met most of them. Earl Grady arrived on a Thursday in a pickup truck so ordinary it disappeared from memory the moment he stepped out of it. He was early 60s, unhurried, with the particular stillness of someone who had spent decades watching people who didn't want to be watched. He sat at my kitchen table and listened without taking notes while I laid out everything I'd observed. Then he asked 3 questions. How long had Daniel known Vanessa? Did she have family in the area? Had she ever been alone in any part of the house? 5 months when they got engaged, I said. She mentions a cousin in Memphis. And yes, I showed her Robert's study in March. I was in the doorway the whole time, but I stepped out once to answer the phone. Maybe 3 minutes. Earl nodded. I'll start with background and work forward. Give me a week. While I waited, I did what I had spent a career training myself to do. I acted normally. Vanessa called twice that week, warm and enthusiastic about the engagement party we'd agreed to host at the farm in June. She had ideas about the catering, about string lights along the fence line, about whether the ceremony the following fall might happen right there in the lower pasture where Robert used to work. I listened and agreed and made notes, and every night I sat in Robert's chair and reminded myself that I might be wrong, that my grief might be making me suspicious of the first woman to make my son genuinely happy in years, that I owed it to Daniel to be certain before I said a word. Earl called on day 8. Vanessa Cole is a legal name, he said. Changed in 2021. Her birth name is Tara Pruitt. She's from Memphis. The kitchen tilted slightly. I sat down. Pruitt, I repeated. Carl Pruitt's daughter. Earl's voice was measured, careful. You'll remember the name. I remembered. Carl Pruitt had owned Pruitt Building Group out of Memphis. In 2009, Robert's company had won a federal contract for a courthouse expansion in Knoxville. A contract Pruitt had bid on aggressively and lost. Over the next 2 years, Carl Pruitt submitted fraudulent bids on a series of smaller federal projects, falsifying subcontractor certifications and diverting funds. Robert had been deposed as a witness in the federal fraud case. His testimony about industry billing standards had helped establish the baseline against which Pruitt's falsifications were measured. Carl Pruitt was convicted in 2012 and sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. He died of a heart attack in his third year of incarceration. He was 58 years old. Tara Pruitt had been 19 years old when her father went to prison. "She's done this before," Earl continued. "I found one prior case. A man in Charlotte, widower, successful architect. His daughter had just gotten married. Tara, going by a different name then, got close to the family through a contractor connection. She was inside the house for a year before they caught on. By then, she'd copied enough financial documentation to allow a real estate attorney to file a fraudulent lien against the property. Did it succeed? The family caught it in time. They didn't press charges. Easier to make it go away." A pause. "She's been thorough with you, Carolyn. The study visit wasn't casual. I pulled the phone records I had access to. She made a 40-minute call to a number in Memphis 20 minutes after leaving your house in March. Her cousin, a real estate attorney named Marcus Pruitt, her father's nephew." Earl paused again. "They're patient. They've been building a picture of your assets for months." I sat for a long time after we hung up. The afternoon light came through the kitchen windows the way it had for 35 years, falling across the same floor Robert had refinished himself the summer. Daniel turned 12. I thought about a 19-year-old girl watching her father be taken away. I thought about grief that curdles into something harder over 10 years. I thought about my son, who had no idea he was being used as an instrument of someone else's long-held anger. Then I called Catherine. We met 2 days later, the three of us, at Catherine's office. Earl laid out what he had: the name change, the prior case in Charlotte, the calls to Marcus Pruitt, the pattern of questions Vanessa had been asking me, all of it documented, team-stamped, sourced. "We don't have enough for criminal charges yet," Catherine said. "What she's done so far is gather information. That's not illegal." "What would make it illegal?" I asked. "If she files anything? A false lien? A forged document? A fraudulent power of attorney? The moment she acts on what she's gathered, we have her." Catherine looked at me over her reading glasses. "The engagement party is in 6 weeks. She'll be in your home with 70 guests as cover. That's when I'd move if I were planning this." "Then that's when we move too," I said. Earl arranged the surveillance. 2 cameras inside the house. One in the study, one in the hallway outside it. Both legal under Tennessee law, both motion activated and remotely monitored. A third outside on the driveway, pointed at vehicles. He drilled me on chain of custody, on what not to touch if something happened, on how to preserve any document she might try to access. The hardest part of the 6 weeks was Daniel. He called every Sunday as always. He talked about the party, about a project he was finishing in Atlanta, about Vanessa and the way she made him feel less alone in the world since his father died. I listened and asked the right questions and carried the weight of what I knew like a stone in my coat pocket, always there. Impossible to set down. Once, on a Sunday in late May, he said, "Mom, you seem quiet." "I'm always quiet on Sunday evenings," I said. "It's when I miss your father most." He was silent for a moment. "Me too." I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to protect him the way I had when he was 7 and fell off his bicycle and looked up at me from the gravel, expecting me to make it not have happened. But I couldn't give him something this large without proof. Grief had made him trust again slowly and carefully, and the possibility that I was wrong, even the small possibility, was one I couldn't act on until I was certain. I went to the cemetery on the Tuesday before the party. Robert's stone was simple, gray granite, exactly what he'd asked for. Robert James Holloway, 1954-2021, builder, father, husband. I sat on the bench I had placed beside it and told him everything, the way I had every important case in our marriage. He had always been the one who helped me think out loud. You always said I was too cautious on the bench, I told him. That I waited for one more piece of evidence when I already knew. You might be right, but I need to be sure this time. She's going to be in our house. Near everything you built. The wind moved through the cedar trees behind the cemetery fence. I sat until I felt steady. I won't let her take it, I said. I promise. The party was a Saturday in June, the kind of Tennessee evening that makes you forgive the summer heat. String lights along the fence line exactly as Vanessa had suggested. Caterers on the porch. 70 guests moving through the house and yard. Champagne glasses catching the last of the daylight. Vanessa was radiant. She moved through the crowd with Daniel, introducing herself to his father's old colleagues, his childhood friends, neighbors who had known our family for decades. She was exactly what she appeared to be, warm, attentive, lovely. I watched her and felt the particular loneliness of knowing something no one else in the room knew. Catherine was there as a guest, which she was. Earl was parked down the road, monitoring the camera feeds on a laptop, his phone connected directly to mine. At 8:15, Vanessa excused herself from a conversation near the fireplace and moved toward the hallway. I watched from across the room. She turned toward the back of the house, away from the bathrooms in the direction of Robert's study. My phone buzzed. Earl, she's moving. Study direction. Camera 2 is active. I waited, counted, kept a conversation going with Robert's former business partner about nothing I can now remember. 4 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. She photographed 6 documents from the filing cabinet. Property deed, trust summary, 2 account statements, patent royalty schedule, insurance policy. A pause. She's replacing them now. Clean hands, no fingerprints on documents. She's done this before. Get everything, I typed back. Already recording. You have it all. I excused myself from the conversation and walked to the kitchen. I stood at the counter and breathed. 70 people in my home. My son in the other room. The deed to the land Robert had loved in someone else's phone. About to travel to Memphis. Then Daniel appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked at me, then looked away, then looked back. Something in his face had changed. He crossed the kitchen in 4 steps, picked up a cocktail napkin from the counter, and pressed it into my hand without a word. He was already gone by the time I unfolded it. Mom, she's not real. I heard her on the phone. Stop this. I looked at the napkin for a long moment. Then I went back to the party. Vanessa was back in the main room, standing with Daniel, her hand through his arm, talking with 2 of our neighbors about the fall wedding she and Daniel were beginning to plan. She looked up when I came in and gave me a smile that I now understood completely. I thought of Carl Pruitt, 58 years old, dying in a federal facility 300 miles from his daughter. I thought of Tara at 19, watching what happened to a family when a life falls apart. I understood the shape of it. I didn't forgive it. But I understood. I found Daniel's eyes across the room. Give me 5 minutes, I said quietly as I passed him, not stopping. Then come find me. I slipped down the hallway to the back bathroom and locked the door. I called Catherine. She photographed the documents, I said. Earl has everything on video. And Daniel knows something. He gave me a note. Are you ready? Catherine asked. Yes, I'll move into position. I called Earl. Can you get here in 10 minutes? I'm already at the end of the drive, he said. Say the word. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror for a moment. 64 years old, 31 years on the bench, 3 years widowed, all of it right here in this face. Come in, I said. Daniel was waiting in the hallway when I came out. His face was the face of a man who had spent the last 2 hours holding something terrible and alone. I took his arm and spoke quietly. I know, I said. I've known for 2 months. I have proof. Will you stand with me? He didn't hesitate. Yes. I walked back into the main room. The conversation was easy and warm, and I let it be that for exactly 90 more seconds. Then I stepped to the center of the room, where the ceilings were high and my voice would carry, and I spoke loudly enough to be heard over the music. Excuse me. The room quieted gradually, faces turning. Vanessa looked up from across the room. Something shifted almost imperceptibly behind her eyes. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," I said. "This home has been full of people I love for 35 years, and I hope it will be for 35 more." I paused. "But before we go any further, there's something this room needs to know." Vanessa set down her champagne glass with precise, careful deliberation. "The woman standing with my son," I said, "is not who she claims to be. Her name is not Vanessa Cole. It's Tara Pruitt. She changed it legally in 2021. I looked at her directly. "Her father was Carl Pruitt. He bid on a federal contract against my late husband's company in 2009 and lost. He was later convicted of federal fraud and died in prison in 2015. Tara was 19 years old. The room had gone completely still. "I understand grief," I said. "I understand that losing a parent changes you in ways that take years to understand. I have genuine compassion for what she experienced." My voice steadied. "But in the past 4 months, she has entered my home under false pretenses, photographed private financial documents belonging to my husband's estate, and has been sharing that information with her cousin, a real estate attorney in Memphis, for the purpose of filing fraudulent claims against this property." "That's not true," Vanessa said. Her voice was controlled, but the warmth was gone. "Margaret, I don't know what you think you've seen, but—" Earl Grady stepped in from the front hallway. He crossed the room and set a laptop on the dining table. The screen showed 4-minute video footage from the study camera. Time-stamped, clear. Vanessa at the filing cabinet. Documents removed, photographed with her phone, replaced. All of it visible, all of it documented. The room watched in silence. "Tonight alone," Catherine said, stepping forward from her position near the fireplace. She opened the legal portfolio she'd been holding all evening. "We have video evidence of document theft. We have a documented prior case from Charlotte, North Carolina in 2019. A different name, the same method. We have phone records connecting her to Marcus Pruitt, her cousin, including a call made from this property in March." Catherine set a printed page on the table. "We have a written record of the specific financial documents she accessed tonight, and their contents, which she had no legal right to photograph or transmit. She knew about the patents," I said. "The trust structure, the account values, everything she needed to file a fraudulent lien or a forged power of attorney against an estate she has no legal connection to. None, because an engagement confers no property rights to anyone on either side of the family." That last part was for the room. 70 people, some of them with their own estates, their own children. Let them hear it plainly. Vanessa looked at Daniel. Whatever she was about to say, he spoke first. "I heard you on the phone tonight," he said quietly. "In the back hallway. You didn't know I was there." His voice was steady in a way that cost him something. "You called someone and said, and I'm going to say this exactly as I heard it, the old woman keeps everything in the study. The patents alone are worth coming back for. I've got what we need." The silence that followed was the kind I remembered from verdicts. Vanessa's composure held for another 3 seconds. Then it fractured, not into tears, but into something harder. The warmth left her face entirely, and what remained was something old and tired and furious. "Your husband destroyed my family," she said to me. Her voice was flat. "He testified against my father. He didn't have to do that. He chose to. Your father committed federal fraud," I said. "Robert told the truth about industry standards. He didn't pursue your father. He answered questions under oath. He put him in prison. A jury put him in prison. I kept my voice even. And I am sorry that you lost him. I am genuinely sorry. But you came into my son's life to take something that isn't yours, and you were willing to use him to do it." She looked at Daniel again. For just a moment, something crossed her face that might have been real. "I don't know. Some people are so practiced that you can't tell where the mask ends." "The sheriff's department is outside," Earl said. "Detective Harlan has the documentation package. Detective Ray Harlan came through the front door with a deputy. He was professional and unhurried. "Tara Pruitt," he said, "I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of unlawful photography of financial documents, conspiracy to commit fraud, and related charges to be specified. You have the right to remain silent." She didn't say anything else. She walked out of my home between two officers, through the door where Robert had carried me across the threshold in 1986, and the June night outside swallowed her up. The room let out a collective breath. Then people started moving, talking, some coming to find me, some standing in clusters processing what they'd witnessed. Daniel was beside me. I put my arm around my son and felt him shaking slightly, the way he had as a small boy after nightmares. And I held on. "I'm sorry," he said against my shoulder. "You gave me the note," I said. "You stood up. That's all I needed." 5 months later, in November, we sat on the back porch on a cold, clear afternoon and watched the lower pasture turn gold the way it does every fall. Daniel had come home for a long weekend. He'd been seeing a counselor in Atlanta and said it was helping. He looked more like himself, which is to say he looked more like his father, that same unhurried steadiness settling back into his face. Tara Pruitt pleaded guilty to 3 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud. Marcus Pruitt, her cousin, lost his law license pending an investigation by the Tennessee bar. The Charlotte family came forward after seeing the news coverage, and their case was reopened. "Do you think she ever actually liked me?" Daniel asked. I thought about it honestly. "I think some part of what she felt was real," I said. "The rest was what it was. Both things can be true." He was quiet for a moment. "Dad would have spotted her in 5 minutes. Your father spotted everything in 5 minutes. It was deeply annoying." I smiled. "You spotted her too. Don't forget that." He leaned back in his chair. The light was coming down behind the tree line, turning everything amber and long-shadowed. Robert had loved this hour of the day, this exact quality of Tennessee November light. He'd sat in the same chair 1,000 times. I'd told Daniel everything after the party, the full picture of what Robert had left. The trust structures, the patent royalties, the accounts, all of it. He'd been quiet for a long time, and then he'd said what his father would have said. He built all of that quietly. While I was growing up, I didn't know. "He didn't want you to know," I said. "Not until you'd built something yourself first." He was right. We sat until the stars came out. 2 of us where there used to be 3. On land Robert had chosen for reasons that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with what he wanted for the people who came after him. I thought about Carl Pruitt, about the rage that outlived him and nearly reached us from a decade away. I thought about grief, how it either breaks you open into something more generous or calcifies into something that takes everyone it touches down with it. I thought about 38 years of marriage and 31 years on a bench and 64 years of learning to trust what I already knew. "I'm going to be okay," Daniel said. "I know you are," I said. The farm stretched out in front of us in the dark, 220 acres of something Robert had built and tended and meant as a gift. The house behind us held his tools, his blueprints, the coffee mug. I still hadn't moved from the kitchen windowsill. He wasn't here, but we were, and we were safe. And for now, on a cold November night in the place he had loved most in the world, that was everything. If this story stayed with you, I want to ask you something. Have you ever trusted a feeling about someone before you had any evidence to back it up? Comment below and tell me what happened. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, the part about protecting what you've built, please share it. Subscribe to Topaz Revenge for more stories like this one. The world has no shortage of people who mistake patience for kindness. The difference, I've learned, is always in what they're waiting for.